We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the centre of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 27th of May 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up.
I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all.
But in Russia today, representatives from 150 countries will attend a major security conference. We'll find out who's there and what they're going to talk about. Also ahead in the next 60 minutes.
We are the petri dish of Russian propaganda. We do not encounter a direct imminent military threat, but we do encounter constantly the Russian hybrid tactics.
Moldova's foreign minister explains what it's like to have a Russian proxy state on your own territory. Today's papers will come from our Zurich studio. We'll hear the latest headlines from Greece, and we'll find out why diamonds are a girl's best friend, but so are sapphires and rubies too. That's all ahead on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. The US envoy Steve Witkoff has rejected a claim by Hamas that he's supported a plan for a truce in Gaza. Germany says there are no longer any range restrictions on weapons supplied to Ukraine by its Western allies. And King Charles will attend a state opening of Canada's parliament today, widely being seen as a pushback against President Trump's threat to annex Canada as the 51st US state. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, representatives from more than 150 nations head to Moscow today for a security conference. The Russian Security Council has organised a gathering where it's believed issues such as security in space and international security cooperation are on the agenda. I'm joined now by Jenny Mathers, who's Senior Lecturer in International Politics at Aberystwyth University. Welcome back, Jenny. Good to have you with us.
Good morning.
So there was a deliberately vague introduction there because the details about what is happening at this security meeting are rather scarce, I should say.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I've been searching around trying to find a little bit more detail and context, but it seems that this is a meeting which involves national security advisors and intelligence agency heads from these various different countries. It's claimed 150 countries will be sending delegates. And it's a meeting which has happened several times in the past. So it's the 13th international meeting, it's called. It's been happening pretty much since Putin returned to the presidency in 2012. And this is really an effort by Russia, or part of its ongoing efforts, to reach out to countries in the global south primarily. They describe it as a conference for the global south and east, to really kind of try and improve and continue good relations with those countries that are either inclined to be favorable to Russia or sort of sitting on the fence, but willing to listen to Russia's views and willing to have closer sort of security and trading relationships with that country.
Do we know who's going?
They haven't released a proper guest list. They've indicated that they've invited, members of the Commonwealth of Independent States, which is the sort of former Soviet states that still have close links to Russia, the Shanghai Cooperation, various kinds of groupings of security. We're pretty sure that India is sending a representative, but otherwise it's been a little bit vague in terms of exactly who's going to be there.
You mentioned the idea of Russia reaching out. Could you explain in what way? Because reaching out, one would imagine in a security conference, would be to build new alliances and to foster and nurture those alliances which exist already.
Yes, it is that. It's also, I think, Russia wants to present itself really as a country that is keen to promote multilateralism. And it often uses these kinds of words to put it in contrast to the West and the US, which it says are offering a sort of hegemony of the world, that the West wants to dominate the world, whereas Russia is interested in genuine cooperation and multilateral arrangements and agreements. And the emphasis is on what will benefit the global South and East rather than sort of extractive relationships, which the West, it says, is having. And so it's a general kind of sort of network building PR exercise, one of many that Russia engages in, aimed at these parts of the world. But it's also actually a bit of a showcase for modern Russian military equipment, because they're going to have a little bit of a trade fair there, it looks like, where they're going to be showing off some of the things that the Russian military industry is producing. Which
is interesting given the fact that they are looking to other countries to help support, both in terms of personnel and military equipment, their invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're certainly looking to give the impression that Russian defense industry is there, ready to export. And certainly there are certain products which they will be able to export. But yes, Russia is increasingly reliant upon other states, particularly North Korea, Iran, to provide actual military equipment. And as we know, North Korea and now China to provide troops as well.
And do we assume that they will have representatives going to Moscow today, given that 150 countries is a significant number?
That's a very large number, exactly. So you're probably looking at, definitely I would expect the major sort of allies and supporters of Russia to be represented. Also, probably quite a lot of countries from, Africa, probably some from the Middle East, Latin America. Yes, but 150 is an awful lot.
And of those 150 countries, how many of them will be existing partners and allies, or how many will be those who Russia is now trying to woo, who perhaps have been stung by Donald Trump or perhaps are being attracted by the strongman vision of Russia?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, there's going to be a mixture of existing partners and allies and supporters, and those who are maybe sitting on the fence or maybe, interested, possibly attracted, but as you say, being repelled by some of Donald Trump's more, exaggerated and excitable policies, particularly on tariffs, for example. But yes, this is a reinforcement of existing relationships. It's a reaching out to others who might be drawn in, and also, Russia is very interested in emphasizing scale of its efforts. So saying 150, that's important to Russia, to be able to pack in as many as possible, even if some of them might not be terribly interested or just going along for a freebie and a little bit of a ride.
What does this mean for the likes of Ukraine, which is working desperately to maintain as much support as it can? To know that Moscow is playing host to 150 countries must be quite daunting.
Well, yes, although I think it wouldn't be a surprise to the Ukrainians. They're very familiar with Moscow's tactics and its strategies and its efforts to get other countries on board. And I think whereas in the earlier sort of months and so on of the mass invasion stage, Ukraine was really focused first and foremost on developing its relationships with the West. I think increasingly as time has gone on, the Ukrainian government has been reaching out to other parts of the world, trying to gain some supporters and some allies in, the global South, and not allowing Russia to simply, have that possible level of influence in these parts of the world uncontested. So I think Ukraine is fighting back in a way, although not on the same scale as Russia is.
And when it comes to the relationship with the United States, yesterday we saw Donald Trump being absolutely clear and unequivocal about what he thought of Vladimir Putin, calling him crazy. And the Russian response was rather subtle. It differed very starkly from the way that Vladimir Putin refers to Volodymyr Zelensky. Is there a sense that Russia is, just describe what you believe Russia's view and opinion and position with the United States currently is?
Well, it seems that Putin, for the most part, is quite confident of his ability to manage Trump with a minimum amount of effort, using flattery, using well-timed initiatives that might, on the face of it, look impressive but not actually go anywhere, like offering 3-day ceasefire here, or a meeting in Turkey there, which don't actually produce very much. So I think Putin probably feels that he's got the measure of Trump. What was interesting about the official response so far that we've had from Moscow has come from Dmitry Peskov, who's the Kremlin spokesman, and he, on the one hand, praised Trump for his efforts to get negotiations going again, and said how much Russia appreciated it. But he also said that Trump's response to specific comments about Putin being crazy, this reflected sort of emotion, and it was an emotional moment, an emotional overload here. And that's quite interesting, because emotion, in the way that the Russian officials tend to use it when they use it to describe a leader, tends to be a belittling phrase. It's quite feminizing. This person is emotional, they're not rational. And so it's a little bit of a sideways insult to Trump, although he may not pick up on this detail, that, Trump is just being emotional. He's not being very rational here, but he'll calm down in time. He'll calm down and he'll come back to our side.
And what for the likes of the coalition of the willing? I mean, we've just heard in the headlines that Germany is now saying there's no limit to the range of weapons that can be supplied to Ukraine, so that Ukraine can now start to strike deep into Russian territory, targeting its military sites. When you place that in the context of the Moscow Security Conference, is there a sense that we're now looking at a deeper, longer-term division between those who will, for the foreseeable, back Russia, and those who are doing everything that they can to shore up against Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Yes, although there is a very substantial part of the world's international community that's not doing either of those two things. And so I think a lot of the 150 people that are, or nations that are being represented at the Moscow conference are probably that number is probably substantially inflated by people who are not strong allies of Moscow, but they're perhaps to be persuaded. So I think, we may be looking at something like a new non-aligned movement as we go into this new stage of the world. Non-aligned movement in the Cold War was mainly in the global South, countries that didn't feel themselves to be close to either the Western Bloc or the Soviet-led bloc, and so sort of held themselves apart a bit. And that might be what we're going to be seeing more of in the future.
Jenny Mathers, Senior Lecturer in International Politics at Aberystwyth University. Thank you for joining me on The Globalist. Now, yesterday, Nika Jordan was sworn in as Romania's new president. And there's widespread relief among EU governments at the eventual result of the country's election. But nowhere was relief more profound than in one aspiring EU country. Moldova had already banned from its territory the defeated candidate in the contest, George Simeon, who'd repeatedly suggested that Moldova should be reincorporated into Romania. Well, in Chisinau, Monocle's contributing editor Andrew Muller heard from Moldova's Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Mihai Popsoi to talk about that and other matters, including Moldova's evolving relations with the Russian proxy state in its own territory.
We do not encounter a direct imminent military threat, thankfully, in light of the incredible courage and sacrifice of the Ukrainian armed men and women. But we do encounter constantly the Russian hybrid tactics. Mm-hmm. We are the petri dish of Russian propaganda. There are incredible efforts being made on the Russian side to undermine us with illegal campaign finance, funneling money into the country to initially bribe politicians on the pro-Russian side. And when they realized that there was so much corruption in these politicians that they've been funding for so long, that even the Russians were shocked, that they decided to go at the heart of democracy at the very people with whom the sovereignty is invested with, that is the voters, the citizens. And in the presidential election, in the Euro-referendum, we've encountered a significant operation to directly corrupt voters. And it's very likely to step up significantly ahead of the parliamentary election. But then again, we are learning, we're adapting, we're improving, our institutions are becoming more resilient. At the same time, our law enforcement is being more proactive in deconstructing this corrupt networks that are undermining Moldovan democracy. So we are trying to work across institutions so that these attempts by the Kremlin to undermine us, to reduce our capacity to withstand these hybrid tactics, so that they don't achieve their goal. In the meantime, quite to the contrary, we're becoming more resilient, we're becoming more capable, and in fact, we are very eager to share this information, these lessons learned, these experiences with our partners, so that our friends further west don't have to endure what we have to go through.
The Kremlin does still have that wedge the size of Transnistria in Moldova. Is anything shifting with that? Do you think you're any closer than you were, say, when we last spoke nearly a year ago to making progress?
You'd be surprised. We are, and this is ironically as a result of some actions by the Kremlin. The fact that they've turned off the gas this winter to the entire Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova, and it was the European Union that has come to the rescue after about a month of literally freezing in winter with no gas and no electricity. We reached out to our friends in Brussels and in member states to help with this humanitarian effort, because it was exactly the calculation of the Kremlin that this will create a humanitarian crisis in Moldova, that the economy will be severely affected, that this will create further instability in order to damage the government. As a result of European Union stepping in, inevitably people on the ground will start asking questions. How come when we hear all this propaganda about the decadent West and the virtuous East, it is exactly the supposedly protector in the Kremlin that is imposing this enormous misery on the people in the middle of winter, effectively holding them hostage and bargaining chips. And it is the European Union that is coming in a totally disinterested way, in a unconditional way to support citizens, in a gesture of solidarity.
So weirdly, might the last 3 years actually have improved relations between Chisinau and Tiraspol?
Well, the relations between people didn't really need much improvement, because people-to-people contacts for decades now have been great. I mean, there is nothing...
Because people come and go across that border all the time.
People
right?
come and go, there are relatives, there are business connections, people come to study here for healthcare needs, you name it. I mean, from many points of view, we are one country. I mean, from basically all points of view, we are one country, with the only caveat of the illegal Russian military presence there. But from the sports perspective, we are one country. Our championships, be it football, volleyball, basketball, you name it, it's one championship. From the economic standpoint, everything that is exported from the region is exported with Moldovan customs stamps made in Moldova. And in fact, 80% of everything that is exported from that region goes to the European Union. The rest of Moldova, 70%. So the Transnistrian region of Moldova is even more anchored in the European market than the rest of the country. So there are many linkages, and fertile ground certainly is being created, including by the consequence of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. The border between Moldova and Ukraine on the Transnistrian segment had been shut, which hasn't been the case for 30 years. And the Odessa port was a lifeline for the region. Moldova is, of course, now totally diversified when it comes to gas. Now we are finalizing our electricity diversification projects, and will be a lot more resilient than we've been before the war. So yes, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, even though it has brought enormous suffering, and the economic impact in the case of the Republic of Moldova has been felt, but we have also used this time of struggle to persevere, to build resilience, and we are better off now when it comes to our energy security, to our cyber security, and the overall resilience of the society. So this is a testament to the resilience of Moldovan people, but also the incredible solidarity of the international community with the Republic of Moldova, primarily the European Union, friends over the Atlantic, US and Canada, Japan, Norway, and many other friends.
I just want to ask finally about the recent presidential election in Romania, where it looked for a long time that would be won by somebody who fundamentally believes that Moldova is part of Romania and who I know is banned from Moldova for that reason. I was struck by reports that both you and President Sandu had voted in that election, which I think to a lot of people from outside would seem a bit strange, that a president of one country and the deputy prime minister of one country vote in the presidential election of another country.
I'm not sure if it's necessarily strange, since I would assume there are many dual citizens in the UK that have American citizenship and would be able to vote in those elections.
Well, absolutely. I'm an Australian and I can vote in British elections, but
exactly.
But I'm not the Prime Minister of Australia.
But if you were, you would still be voting, and that would not be strange. But our history with Romania is somewhat unique. There has definitely been other countries or situations that have had a similar fate, but it's still our relationship to this day is special to Romania because we used to be part of Romania. In the interwar period between the First and Second World War, we were part of Romania. So that's the unique story of Moldova, and the fact that Romania has managed to remain firmly anchored into the Euro-Atlantic space is definitely a positive for the Republic of Moldova and for the entire region. And I'm speaking here more as a citizen than a foreign minister, because it's unbecoming of foreign ministers to comment on political affairs of neighboring countries, or any countries for that matter. But as a citizen, I'm certainly happy that Moldovan citizens were able to mobilize, just like Romanian citizens, both in Romania and in the diaspora.
That was Moldova's Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Mihai Popsoi in conversation with Monocle's Andrew Muller in Chișinău. Still to come on today's programme.
Because of the anchor of our logo and also maybe the colours we use in summer, people associate us more like a summer brand. But actually we try to reverse a little bit that part, and we try to invest more in winter.
We meet the founder of La Paz, a clothing brand based in Porto. Stay with us on The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS House View, you get the big picture in bite-sized articles, delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts, all focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals. UBS, banking is our craft.
8:22 in Zurich, which is where we head now for today's newspapers. Joining me from our studio in Dufourstrasse 90 is Gorana Gergic, Monocle security correspondent and senior researcher with the Swiss and Euro-Atlantic security team at the ETH Zurich Centre for Security Studies. Good morning, Gorana. How's it looking in Zurich? Any dips into the lake today?
Morning, Emma. Well, not any dips into the lake because the weather is quite dreadful, actually. It doesn't look like we are on the cusp of summer. If anything, it looks very autumnal at the moment, very grey. No sunshine yet, but maybe some people are dipping in the lake. I'm not one of them, for sure. No,
that might rule ourselves out from that one. Let's pick up some newspapers instead. They seem drier and warmer. What have you spotted?
Well, first story comes from the Financial Times and The Guardian and various other papers that are now reporting that Germany and other Ukraine's supporters and allies in Europe are scraping range limits on arms that they're sending to Kyiv. And I think that this is a really significant shift in terms of Western support support for Ukraine, because we know that for a long time the restriction on the range of weapons that Ukrainian partners would be sending to Kyiv was the sort of bone of contention. And now they are basically and effectively greenlighting strikes that would be deeper into Russian territory. So this is really a kind of sea change in terms of that support. But one thing that we still don't know, and this came out of the press conference basically that Friedrich Merz, Germany's chancellor, gave, that whether Germany would actually be supplying the Taurus cruise missiles to Ukraine, and those are the kind of prize missiles with a range of over 500 kilometers, so more potent than, for instance, U.S. ATACMS, and really potentially, again, a major sort of thumb on the scale in favor of Ukraine in its struggle against Russia.
So we have this problem still of the principle being accepted, but the practice being slightly trickier.
Absolutely, as always. And I would say one other thing, even if Germany supplied Taurus missiles to Ukraine, it is still dependent on U.S. And how so? That is because the U.S. actually has these critical guidance systems for even non-U.S. missiles. So without U.S. support and acquiescence, potentially Taurus missiles and even UK Storm Shadows are not as accurate as and effective actually as they would be without U.S. support for these guidance systems.
Let's move on to another sort of another area of defence within Europe. A Financial Times article talking about Fincantieri saying that underwater defences are something which the European Union, Europe, absolutely sadly lacks. We were talking a few days ago about defence in the likes of the Baltic, which is quite heavily protected. Yet underwater defences are a real weakness, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go by this story from FT and CEO of Italian shipbuilding giant Fincantieri, we would think that the future is truly underwater. But here it's more in the positive sense. So what he has done in this article, in the interview that he gave for FT, is urged Europe to invest urgently in its undersea defenses. So more submarines, better surveillance, stronger protection of undersea infrastructure like pipelines or underwater cables. So as you already mentioned, in today's security landscape, of course, we see increasingly that the threats are not just coming from air or from land. They do come from below. We've seen plenty of these sabotage incidents, especially around the Baltic, but also there are various other operations that are conducted even in the Mediterranean that have to do also with deep sea espionage, and again the kind of struggles that go on in and under the sea.
And this fusion of public and private, now that we have this situation now whereby the private sector is so dependent on providing infrastructure to so many countries, and that moment of intersection when governments have to step in to ensure that the protection of a country is in fact involves the alliance with a private company.
Well, you're absolutely right there, because in a lot of these cases, I think the kind of story of undersea cables is an exemplary one where for so long, these things were actually mainly in the hands of private companies. And now there's all of a sudden much more of a kind of question of securitization of the whole kind of topic and how governments work with companies to ensure that these are protected, that they are resilient, that there's enough slack there in case something goes wrong. And I mean, in this particular case, of course, Fincantieri is state-controlled shipbuilder. So I think that in terms of that sort of public-private partnership, we definitely see that they're very, very prominent.
Finally, a little bit of climate news, courtesy of the back end of a penguin.
Absolutely. And I never thought that I was going to report on a story that involves penguins, climate change, and, what they do to, metabolize food. So this is a legit article. I looked it up. It's part of Nature Journal. So, it's not in any way sort of dubious. It went through peer review. And basically, the story goes like this. In Antarctica, penguin poop is doing more than just feeding their chicks. It's helping fight climate change. So scientists have found that penguin droppings fertilize some algae blooms, which in turn absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they are surprisingly effective natural carbon sink. So a great reminder that even small-scale ecosystems play a role in global climate dynamics. So sometimes the solutions come from the most unexpected places, Emma.
Yes, thank you for that. Gorana Gergic, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Zurich. The time here in London is 7:29 a.m. You're listening to The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A look now at some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today. The US envoy Steve Witkoff has rejected a claim by Hamas that he supported a plan for a truce in Gaza. He denied the US had backed any such proposal. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made no mention of the idea, but said he hoped to make an announcement on hostages within the next day. Germany says there are no longer any range restrictions on weapons supplied to Ukraine by its Western allies. The Chancellor Friedrich Merz said this meant Ukraine could defend itself by attacking military positions inside Russia. A car has ploughed into a crowd after the victory parade for Liverpool Football Club in the United Kingdom. 27 people have been injured, 2 of them seriously. A 53-year-old man has been arrested. Thousands of people had turned out to celebrate the team's success. And King Charles will attend the state opening of Canada's Parliament today. It's widely being seen as a pushback against President Trump's threat to annex Canada as the 51st US state. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Let's hear now from a leading Indonesian film director. Riri Reza has produced many commercially successful works such as What's Up With Love 2 and The Rainbow Troops, as well as winning more than 15 international awards. Well, Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi heard from him to talk about his works and the identity of Indonesian cinema. The interview began with Ryuma asking him about the background story of how he started filmmaking.
In Indonesia, back in early 90s, film is not very popular media because it's actually have a very strong involvement of government in the system of production, distribution, especially in permit and censorship. So for young people like me, film is something like very far away. But I think during that time also, because pop culture is rising in Indonesia, we started to have like a many independent music group releasing their albums and become very popular among youth. Film is like something that wait to be sort of become part of the youth culture, popular culture. And then I finally decided that film is my way. And I started to learn about the history, the connection between like international cinema and classical Hollywood cinema. So I started to see like Indonesia has a lot to opportunity to be part of this, regional or global dialogue with film. And not long after, we started to think of our, path to independent film, produce our film independently, not like majority of films that time that made for very commercial purpose. I think the phenomenon in regional Asia, independent filmmaking in different part of the world, started to intrigue the younger generation, my age that time, to involve.
Yes, thank you. For example, your hit work, The Rainbow Troops, is set on Belitung Island, and Humba Dreams is in Sumba Island. I think one characteristic of your films is that they describe the dramas in places other than Jakarta or Java Island. Why is this, and what significance does this have?
What interesting for us in Indonesia is traveling. Our country is like very big and diverse, and yet beautiful. It's you travel to the east, you find maybe like for 1 hour flight, 1 or 2 hour flight, you already arrive in a totally different landscape and sort of climate, and it affects the diversity of natural diversity in that area too. So as a filmmaker growing up in Jakarta, as a young people growing up in Jakarta, surrounded by pop culture, like any city in the world, back in the 90s, we already listened to, for example, phenomenon of new, like a new wave or punk. And in the mid 2000, we are listening to Radiohead and all these popular Brit pops, I think it's very, very small chance that you will understand your Indonesianness unless you go there to actually do research and work on stories. So it's an opportunity for me to understand who I am as a person and as a Indonesian by, making film in different part of Indonesia. And I think it's very important for my audience. Some of my early film was very popular, It's seen by, millions of audience in Indonesia. So they know me. They sort of trust my work. So if I got a chance to show them different part of Indonesia with equally interesting story, there will be a chance for me to sort of share that spirit, that idea of knowing yourself. And if you understand and know yourself, there is a chance that you will be excited about who you are and your identity.
I think this is a difficult question to answer. What do you think is the identity of Indonesian cinema?
It's not very simple to define because our country is I don't know, of course this is generalization, but you can really see Japanese cinema from striking visual identity. But in Indonesia, the idea of Indonesia is like something that's so lots of possibilities. The identity should be, I think, it shows the struggle of people that live between tradition and modernity, between hardship and very capitalistic society. So it's always like say something about that. That is for me the potential identity, possibilities of identity of Indonesian cinema that make it unique in the world.
Okay, for final question, what does the filmmaking mean to you?
It's a search for myself, I think. I was born in the 1970, and I grew up during the time of change. I moved from one small city in Sulawesi, in the central of the Indonesia, to the capital when I was 10 years old, and immediately exposed to the idea of global popular culture. I'm a regional kid, but I also a very international student of the world. So cinema is a media, especially when I make film, it's a process for me, like understand all this connection, finding all this connection. I'm not sure whether I find it all. I'm still very confused sometimes, to be honest. So it's a way of finding connections, and I'm very grateful that I can live and I can live my life. I have new friends all the time, so that's how cinema is open door for me.
That was the Indonesian filmmaker Riri Riza talking to Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi. You're listening to Monocle Radio. Now, at this weekend's Badi Market in Zurich, held in cooperation with Visit Portugal, Monocle's executive producer and senior foreign correspondent Carlotta Rebello and the journalist Juliet Linley caught up with André Bastos Teixeira, the founder of the clothing brand La Paz. They began by asking him what the brand is all about.
Well, La Paz, for the people that don't know, it's a Portuguese brand. We are based in Porto, in the north of Portugal. We are doing next year our 15th anniversary. We've been working with one of the best manufacturers, or try to find the best manufacturers, and also fabric suppliers in Portugal. And that's part of our DNA. We produce everything in Portugal. And we do a casual, sophisticated, kind of seafaring-inspired brand, because obviously being and born in Portugal, it's kind of part of it as well. And yeah, it's been a great adventure. And with Trunk in specific, we've been working with them for about 7 years now. We approached Matt in London one time to present the product. And in the beginning, it was a bit difficult to get in, but then after some years, we were able to start our collaboration. We're really happy with it.
And of course, La Paz, it's not just a summer menswear brand. The brand has evolved a lot through the years. But, there's this almost modern feel to it, even though it is so inspired by tradition as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the beginning, because of the anchor of our logo and also maybe the colors we use in summer, and which are usually very strong, people associate it more like a summer brand. But actually we try to reverse a little bit that part, and we try to invest more in winter. And in fact, the first season we started was in winter, and we presented in New York, and it was like a total look for winter brand. So we use a lot of Shetland wool, we try to use a lot of thick fabrics, try to support a lot of the steel wool manufacturers that are quite a few now in the center of the country, in Serra da Estrela. We work with Woodell factory, which is a great factory, and yeah, that's been really good.
And apart from wool, I understand you also work with fishing nets.
Well, fishing nets, we work in two areas. The first area which is the one we started, is in our architectural projects in our shops. So basically our shops are made with a studio from the north of Portugal, which are friends of ours, called Gorvel, and they do the fittings of our closets, and they're all made by, basically inspired in these kind of cages of the fish nets that are used to catch lobsters and also octopus and other kind of fish, and we use that. And then recently we started to work in a production in the swimwear, which is quite seen nowadays, which is recovering companies that are recovering plastic from the ocean, and then transform it into yarn, and then from yarn transform it into fabric. And that's really working well.
This connection to the Atlantic for me is such an icon of like what La Paz is all about. Every time I talk to you, like it really transpires this inspiration that the ocean gives the brand. And yesterday night you were one of the speakers at our event, and you shared this amazing story that I really want you to tell again for our listeners, about the model that you use, who's like that you've used since the very beginning, who's like this old fisherman from a village in Portugal. Please tell us that story.
Yes, okay. So when me and Jose were starting to create the brand, and we did the first collection, we then after needed to do the shooting, and starting to, shall we do the shooting with a typical classic model, or shall we use a friend, and I think would be nicer, we were speaking, would be nice to find like an old creature, like a sea wolf, like something that would represent a lot the brand. And we find this person that was actually living with a friend of a brother of Zé, my business partner, and he said, there's this guy that we live, it's really humble, he's really sweet, and let's go and meet him. So we went to meet him in a place, and then when we arrived there, we approached him, explained him for what it is, and he said, please don't tell me that it's to do Santa Claus pictures, because he has this really big beard and white hair. And he said, no, this is for a Portuguese brand, we explained everything, and we started working with him. And I mean, the guy has such a great picture. He has beautiful blue eyes. His skin is very crusty from the sun because he spends a lot of time, obviously, close to the sea. So it's a really beautiful model. So we've been using him for quite a long time. The funny story is that sometimes that we need to take pictures of him. Because he does not have a mobile phone, we need to contact the cafe where he lives close by, and then when he hangs out in the cafe, they will tell us, and he comes and joins us. He comes and meets us at the office or at the shop, and he just shows up. He does not have a mobile phone. He's very humble, simple guy, but very, very sweet.
That was Andre Bastos Teixeira in conversation with Monocle's Carlotta Rebello and Juliet Linley.
There's a craft to every question, which is why at UBS, we query every aspect of the market, working with specialized experts and award-winning research teams, covering over 3,500 stocks in 50 countries, all delivered in a comprehensive library, answering what you want with what you need. UBS, banking is our craft.
"9:45 in Athens, which is where we head now for a Greek news roundup. I'm joined by the journalist Emmanuel Papavasiliou. Very good morning to you, Emmanuel.
Good morning, Emma. How are you?
How's Athens looking this morning? Do I dare ask?
It's great. How's London?
Yes. Tell us what's happening where you are.
All right. So first story for today is that Greece basically took a major step in its digital transformation this month. The Prime Minister yesterday announced the launch of a personal identification number, which is basically like an ID. It's a unique lifelong ID that will streamline how citizens will interact with the state in one go. So Kyriakos Mitsotakis yesterday announced the rollout during a cabinet meeting, and he called that number a key to unlocking any transaction with the public sector. In essence, it replaces Greece's current system of multiple identifiers that we have right now, like we have different numbers for the tax, the social security number, ID card numbers. We'll only have a single universal code now. And the move is part of a broader push to modernize the Greek state through digital governance. So citizens will be able to obtain their personal number via their government website, the .gov.gr platform. And there's going to be a relevant app, which will be called My Info app. If there's any problem with your ID number or your details, you can also change it from there. Everyone can do it on their own. And the Prime Minister announced that this is going to be live as early as June, so as soon as possible. And I think it's a huge step that brings Greece closer to the likes of Estonia and Denmark, who already have similar systems of centralized digital IDs now. And hopefully it can cut bureaucracy and make service delivery faster, because, Greece is a country that is very notorious when it comes to bureaucratic things. But, as always with digitization, the challenge is always to make things work. So this announcement is great, but let's see the implementation of this. And the most important thing of them all is how they're going to handle data security situation, the situation there.
Indeed, it is a huge undertaking. And you just could you explore a little bit more the data security landscape of Greece? I mean, how secure a country is it generally considered to be?
Look, so far we haven't had a lot of problems when it comes to data security, but that is because Greece is not a digital first country so far. So there haven't been many issues and problems because there hasn't been so much digitalization in things. So it's going to be a challenge to see how the government and their team is going to roll this out, how smooth it will be, and what's going to happen.
Let's move on to the issue about fraud. I mean, we're talking about security, and now we're talking about fraud. It's a bit of a jump. There is an enormous investigation into potential fraud in Crete, isn't there? Just explain that to us, because it's a very important story.
Yeah, sure. So the European Public Prosecutor's Office is basically now deepening its investigation in what may be one of the largest fraud cases involving EU funds in recent Greek history. and I would say in Greek history, because getting money from the EU is quite recent. This time is centered around agricultural subsidies. So this inquiry focuses on the misappropriation of hundreds of millions of euros that were meant for farmers and livestock breeders, because that money was actually claimed by individuals who posed as agricultural workers, but many of whom had absolutely no real connection to farming at all. And Crete is at the heart of this scandal. They found over 80% of the suspicious subsidies traced back to that island. The Greek prosecutor, Poppy Papandreou, who represents the European Public Prosecutor's Office domestically, has led surprise inspections and data seizures at the offices of the Community Aid Payments Agency, which is an agency there that is responsible for giving away the EU funds to people. So they're investigating this office to see how that happened. So far, there have been criminal charges against roughly 100 individuals. And this for Brussels, it's a reminder, for the need of stricter controls over how EU funds are distributed and monitored in Greece still, especially as they're continuing to pump billions into post-pandemic recovery efforts now.
The interesting thing is you've just told us two stories of sort of the automation of identity and the whole way that an individual fits into the infrastructure of a country, and then you've also just talked about the fact that people are pretending to be farmers and have for a long time been getting away with it. They seem to be a tale of two different countries. How do we bring these narratives together?
I think this is Greece in a nutshell. Because on one hand, there is this new government that is trying to digitize, to modernize. However, there's still, the history and the culture of Greece, and many people who, think that they can take advantage of things. And basically, what needs to be done is a bit more policing. We need to make sure, as we move forward with this new digitalization and these new modernities, at the same time, the government needs to make sure that there's proper policing of these practices.
Finally, the last time I checked, Nike was the Greek goddess of victory, which makes pretty good sense given the fact that I'm talking to you in Athens this morning. So why is it that Adidas decided to mount a drone show over the Acropolis?
So you need to understand our shock as one day, out of nothing, we started seeing huge drone shows above the Acropolis showing a massive Adidas shoe above it, and no one knew what was happening. Basically, Adidas is now facing legal action from the Greek Ministry of Culture after this high-profile drone show that was promoting its latest sneaker. And it obviously caused an uproar in Athens because it looked like the shoe was kicking the Acropolis, as the culture minister Lina Mendoni said. According to the ministry, there were not the necessary approvals taken by Adidas. However, Adidas has pushed back, saying that all the permissions were obtained, that the show did not directly film or use the monument in promotional material. That is a bit of a convoluted statement there. But still, there is a huge backlash that revived a long-standing debate in Greece over how and whether commercial ventures should be allowed to engage with the country's more sacred heritage sites. And it all comes just weeks after the Culture Ministry. They denied director Yorgos Lanthimos permission to film scenes for his upcoming feature film in the Acropolis. And the question here is now, what did Adidas think would happen? It seems to be like they believe that they would target the Greek audience. However, they caused huge uproar with this. And as you're bringing Nike as an example, I'll tell you this. Last year, Nike did it right. Because last year, Nike wanted to also promote their latest shoe, the Pegasus, a running shoe. And what they did was that they just organized a relay of professional athletes to run Mount Olympus, up to Mount Olympus, and film it. That was great. That basically captured the essence of the history, mythology, etc. This is how you do it. The way Adidas did it, I don't know what they were thinking, to be honest with you.
Emmanuel, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on the line from Athens. You're listening to The Globalist. Finally, 2 very rare and valuable precious stones are auctioned at Christie's in Hong Kong today. The Regent Cashmere is a 35-carat royal blue sapphire ring, and the Regal Ruby a 13-carat unheated Burmese ruby. They're expected to be sold for prices not seen in almost a decade. Well, I'm joined now by Tobias Cormand, who's co-founder and managing director of 77 Diamonds, Europe's largest online diamond jeweller. Tobias, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So how rare?
It's very exciting.
It is, isn't it just? Especially if we're all heading off to Hong Kong to raise our paddles. Just tell us how rare are these gems?
Yeah, it's very interesting, but they are incredibly rare, and they both have the same kind of dynamics, which is, cashmere. The majority of the sapphires that were mined happened in kind of the late 1800s, and they find very few large exceptional kind of qualities since then. And just talking about sapphires, so this is quite a rare deposit in the sense that they've never been able to replicate the quality of sapphires coming out of the ground anywhere else in the world. So it's considered to be the premium quality sapphires. And so, there's only a few of them floating around. And when they come up for auction like this, and it's exactly the same with Burma. The Burmese rubies are considered by far and away the best quality rubies. And to get large examples which have been untreated just makes them incredibly rare. And although you can find synthetic versions and you can find other rubies and sapphires throughout the world, not loads, but if you just to compare, rubies and sapphires are much rarer than diamonds, yet they don't hold or they don't achieve the same kind of price per carat that some of the larger and more rare diamonds achieve, even though these are much more rare. So in a way, you can kind of say that they've been underachieving from an investment standpoint. But so to the sapphire that's actually coming up for auction was auctioned off in 2015 and set kind of a benchmark of a price. There was another sapphire, not 35 carats, but 27 carats, which actually holds the record on a price per carat basis. That was 27 carat, and it achieved $243,000 per carat. So we're expecting this sapphire to go for around $250,000 per carat, and it would achieve upwards of $9 million. And with the ruby as well, we're looking for it to break auctions. What's been really interesting is that I think investors are starting to realize that precious stones, rare precious stones, actually are truly rare. And so they've been breaking, auction records kind of left, right, and center, but they're still relatively affordable compared to diamonds on a price per carat basis. So we had an Alexandrite that in December sold for 1.92 million. And it's still relatively low on a price per carat basis. Somehow affordable, though 1.92 million doesn't sound that affordable. But these are incredibly rare, truly rare stones. And so it's really exciting to see kind of what they're going to achieve at auction.
Briefly, Tobias, because time is against us. As someone who works in diamonds, does this mean that diamonds have to step aside for a moment?
We've been selling gemstones for quite some time, and we do that because the people who are real connoisseurs actually come in and they look for something truly rare. You've got some pinks and some blues in the diamond field, which really fall into the category of truly rare. But I think the gemstones need to start punching at their weight. So I think we're going to see a lot more of gemstones starting to break records at auctions as investors are forever pursuing more rare items. And, there's more people coming to the market who can afford these type of purchases as the world expands and grows and the economy grows.
Tobias Cormand, thank you for joining us on The Globalist. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to our producers Laura Kramer and Monica Lillis. Our researcher was Francesca Jilks and our studio manager Lily Austin. After the headlines, more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.